Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Writers Chat. We're very happy to have you with us today, whether you're here with us in the community or you're watching the replay. My name is Johnny Alexander. I'm joined by my co-hosts, Melissa Stroh and Brandy Bro, and our very special guest, CJ Milacci. I'm going to tell you a little bit about CJ. We're so glad to have her with us. Melissa and I had the privilege of meeting her at the Novel Marketing conference in January. And she and I were in the same group. So we were all divided in different groups, mostly by genre. Ours was a platform group, I think. So that's how we got to know each other. And I just loved meeting her and am so glad to have her with us here today. Award-winning author CJ Milacci writes stories for teens and young adults with heart-pounding action and hope. As the podcast host for Read Clean YA with CJ, she loves talking about books and the deeper themes woven into the pages of each novel. She's passionate about crafting stories of good, overcoming evil, finding hope in the midst of seemingly hopeless circumstances, and true acceptance. And today she's here to talk to us about Kickstarter, doing a little bit of a hybrid approach, sharing what Kickstarter is, how it works, some pros and cons, and how she used it to pre-launch her own books. And I was just very impressed when I met her that she's had done all this stuff and studying about Kickstarter and learning all the ins and outs of it. So we're very happy to have her with us here today to tell us what she learned doing her own Kickstarter campaigns.
I'm so excited to be here. Thank you guys for having me. It was wonderful meeting both of you at the Novel Marketing
That's fun.
Conference. I think that was one of my favorite parts about that conference was just getting to connect with some other authors. And I love talking about marketing, so that's always a fun bonus for me. Not every author feels this way, but I think that's why Kickstarter had a draw as well. But I'm excited to dive into everything today for sure.
All right. Well, we're just going to turn it over to you then and let you get started.
Okay, wonderful. Well, again, thank you for that introduction. I'm thrilled to
Mhm.
be here. I see faces that I'm familiar with too in the audience, which
Yeah.
also makes me so happy. Um, Always good to see a friendly face in the crowd, right? So
Mhm.
I love Kickstarter, but it is a little bit of a unique platform and way of publishing a novel. So I wanted to start just for anyone who doesn't know, just give a basic introduction about what Kickstarter is. Like Johnny said, I've used Kickstarter to pre-launch both of my first two books in my series, Recruit of Talionis and Fugitive of Talionis. And I'm planning to pre-launch book 3 the same way. That's going to actually be starting next Friday, hopefully, July 12th. So like I'm using Kickstarter actively for my own launching and publishing journey. But to give a brief like recap of what it is, it's a crowdfunding platform, and they actually say of themselves that their mission is to bring creative projects to life. So it's a website platform where different types of creative projects can be crowdfunded to bring them into existence, essentially. It's not just for books. Kickstarter, actually, I believe its primary thing that they're known for is really games like
Yeah.
board games and that kind of thing. So it's really big in that world, but it's becoming even bigger in the publishing space as well. Thank you, Brandon Sanderson, for your $40 million campaign and helping that. But it is
Yes.
definitely an interesting way of going about publishing a book. And the Kickstarter website is unique in and of itself because it allows a creative to showcase their story behind their project, what a potential backer can expect of the project, and then a way for the person to back the project and support it in order to see it come to life. So you have a threshold or funding goal that they call it. And that's to kind of gauge interest in your product. So for us, that would be our books, right? And it's how you can know if it's successful or not. You can have a funding goal as low as a few $100s and as high as tens of thousands of dollars. It depends on what you need. For an author, I would not recommend, unless you're Brandon Sanderson, doing anything in the tens of thousands of dollars range, as much as that would be lovely for everyone. But that would be a little kind of unrealistic in this space. But it is important to note that Kickstarter is not a means to, it's not publishing itself. It's a means to publishing. So it's a part of your publishing journey. If you run a Kickstarter, it's funded successfully, which means you hit that funding goal, you maybe go over it, you have these people who have backed your project. That's just the first step. Then you're going to fulfill it, but then that doesn't mean it's up on Amazon or Barnes& and Noble or in any other places for people to purchase. So it really is kind of ground zero for the beginning of your publishing journey if you're choosing to go the independent author route. So that's just an important thing to note. And then there are some things that, if you choose Kickstarter, might need a little extra explaining to your followers, your friends, and your family. For example, most people need to know that it is not GoFundMe. It is not the same as something that people are just giving money to help you in a difficult time, which is what GoFundMe is essentially for, right? Kickstarter is really essentially people coming alongside of you, getting excited about what you're creating, what you're doing, and saying, "Look, I see the potential here. I want this in my own life. I'm putting money behind it because I really think this should be brought to life." And that can be for the book, the board game, the crazy whatever creative idea is on there. It's all of that, but it is a way that they can come in and be part of it. So you might need to explain that to them. Usually Kickstarter books specifically cost more money, and you might have to explain the why behind it, but it's because, you're getting, like, a print run of the books usually of some sort, whether it's a small one or a large one, so that's costing you money, and you're also covering some of your publishing costs. It's not just for them to get the book, it's a way for them to, again, come alongside of you and support you in your creative journey. So you might need to kind of walk your friends and family specifically through that, but also your followers, and get help them to understand how this Kickstarter is going to actually really benefit you and help you, and also how it's going to help them. Because at the end of the day, most people care more about how they are going to be benefited by something that they're putting their money behind.
Yes.
You have your great Aunt Sally who's going to be excited to support you no matter what, but your followers who want to read your book, they want to know, like, look, I understand Amazon, I understand Barnes and Noble, I even understand maybe going to my indie bookstore and requesting the book. Kickstarter is something new. It's another place to put their credit card number. It's another thing to create a password and an email account for.
Mhm.
It's another step for them, and they need to understand why it's going to benefit them. And usually this is where you can talk about how the book's going to be prettier, or how you're going to be able to get all these bonuses through stretch goals, which are, after you fund, they're the next goals you create in your campaign to allow your readers to get more fun stuff, whether that's bookmarks or stickers or swag, an extra chapter in the story, a short story, an audiobook. Stretch goals can really, your imagination can run wherever you want to with them, and they can just essentially become this jam-packed item by the end of your campaign, where it's not just a book anymore. They're getting the book, they're getting the ebook, they're getting maybe an audiobook or a sticker and a bookmark, and it's becomes this awesome swag box that arrives for them in their book mail, and it's more exciting than a regular book. So you really want them to understand all of those things as you're explaining the actual part of why you're using Kickstarter and the platform itself, because otherwise people, if they don't understand the why of the choice of purchasing in a certain way, they're just going to say, never mind, I'm doing what I know, I'm doing what I understand, and I'm too busy to try to figure something else out. So you want to
Mhm.
kind of take away all of the excuses of why they wouldn't want Kickstarter, and show them all the amazing reasons why they do want Kickstarter, even if they didn't know it yet. So that is all really important. And I wanted to share some of the reasons I personally chose Kickstarter for myself. And the one of the reasons is because when I first published Recruit of Talionis in 2022, it was when things were beginning to happen more and more on Kickstarter. The publishing space was growing. Brandon Sanderson had just recently run that massive campaign everyone talks about. It was all sort of in that beginning churning process. It's been there before that, I completely understand, but I think it was around this time where you were really starting to see Kickstarter come to life for authors and for the publishing community in general. And I thought it was a really cool publishing option. Like I said earlier, I like marketing, so I'm a little bit of a unicorn in the author world because I think that that's
You
fun.
are.
But it was like, oh, this is really an interesting way to do it. I also have a really close friend of mine, another author. Her name is Corinne Norton, and she herself was interested in doing a Kickstarter. She's a little farther behind me in her publishing journey, and wasn't quite ready to get her book published yet, but she was like, "Look, we'll study it together. I'll read books with you. We'll watch webinars. We'll listen to podcasts. We'll brainstorm how this can work. But you do it first, and then I'll see how it works if I want to do it for me. And she was kind of my final push. And it was actually the best thing because we got to do it together. But I had a friend who was really like, let's do this. Let's jump in. Let's see if this Kickstarter thing can actually work for us as debut authors. So we're
Mhm.
both brand new to the publishing industry. So we're like, will this work? We're not people with these huge platforms. Can we make a successful Kickstarter happen here? So it was great having her. She pushed me into it, very literally pushed me into it. And then I also wanted to see if my book could be successful on Kickstarter. And like I said, I was a debut author when I started it. And I wanted to know, was my book marketable? I write young adult dystopian, and you will hear people say that dystopian is dead in the publishing industry. I talked to a very well-known literary agent at last year, actually, at a writers conference, and he told me that's not true, but people were sick of reading it in the acquisition space, and so they just started saying dystopian was dead, so they didn't have to read it anymore. It made me feel a little better about my personal publishing choices, but I wanted to see, like, is this
Mhm.
a marketable book? I had friends and family that were like, "Oh yeah, sure, sure, that sounds interesting." But it's different to tell someone something sounds interesting and to put money behind it. And so
Yeah.
it was like, is it interesting? Is it good enough that people actually want to give money to see it come to life, to get their own copy and all of that? So the marketability, that was something I wanted to see. Was this good and marketable? And I also, when I decided to go indie, I wanted the control of being an independent author. I wanted to choose my timeline of publication. I wanted certain things that were inherent in the indie route. However, I also wanted my book to be on a shelf in Barnes& and Noble looking exactly like every other very professionally published traditional book. I did not want it to look quote unquote self-published. I wanted it to be well edited, to have an amazing cover that I personally could not do myself. I wanted it to be an excellent, high quality book. And to do that, it costs money.
And
So another bonus of Kickstarter was that it was a way to recoup some of those publishing costs. So I had these different things going on in my own mind. It's why I ended up choosing Kickstarter. I will note that I am a little bit different than some authors. I chose Kickstarter knowing I was going to publish my book, already investing in my cover and already investing in my editing. So I hoped to recoup those costs. But at the end of the day, I was going forward with publishing my book, and I was going forward publishing it at that professional level.
Mhm.
So that's not every person. Some authors want to get their editing costs covered or their book cover design, and that's a definite option, but I think there are some benefits to going in knowing, okay, I'm willing to cover this myself, because it can be hard to get a very high funding. Even a few $1,000s is hard at the beginning levels as a Kickstarter author. So moving on from me, how do you know if Kickstarter is a good fit for you? So, this is an important question because some people hear about Kickstarter. I raised over $8,000 for my first book. I raised over $7,000 for my second book, but I had more backers. So, my first book had less backers, but more people who were like, here, I'm going to give you a high amount of money. And my second campaign had less of the money, but more backers overall. So, it was
Mhm.
about $1,000 less for book two, but it was still a very successful campaign. And I I know that those numbers are exciting because as authors, it can sometimes be like, oh, will I recoup any costs? Will I sell a lot of books or no books? And it's hard to know. And it's nice to be like, oh, well, if I could get, a few $1,000s, several $1,000s, that's fantastic. And you kind of want to just jump right in. But as like a new or debut author, my recommendation really is like before you're just like, I'm just going to do this, actually pause and think, is Kickstarter a good fit for you as an author? They are so much work that if you don't know that it's a good fit for you, it will be overwhelming and exhausting and not worth it at the end. So it is important to think through this. And so if you're a new or debut author, my recommendation would be to know that you're going to publish this book either way. Whether the campaign funds or not, you are going forward with publishing this book. It's something you believe you're supposed to do, and you are like, this is the next step for me. If you're an established author with a strong platform, that's definitely more flexible. The debut versus the established is always going to be a little different because the established author most likely has the platform that they can bring to the campaign with them, which leads me to my next point. You want to have a crowd that you can bring
Mhm.
to Kickstarter. I like to say that in order to get a crowd from Kickstarter, you have to first bring a crowd to Kickstarter. Kickstarter likes to see campaigns that have activity. So if you launch a campaign to crickets, you're not going to find not more crickets. You're not going to find more people on Amazon or not on Amazon, on Kickstarter. Wow, Carly. But it is like Amazon, right? If you publish a book, you can just go publish your book right now on Amazon. Don't do that. Don't recommend at all. But you could just go put it up on KDP and publish your book. But if you do it that way, yeah, maybe one or two people will find it, but most likely your book isn't going to get sales. No one's going to find you. It's the same with Kickstarter. Yes, there are a whole group of people who are going through Kickstarter to find books to read. This is becoming a bigger thing. There's more and more authors bringing their readers to this platform, which means there's more and more readers to discover you on that platform. However, Kickstarter is not going to do anything to share your campaign if it doesn't think that anyone's interested. And you have to show Kickstarter that people are interested. So you want to have people that you can first bring to Kickstarter. This can be a variety of things. I'm not saying you need 50,000 people on your email list or even 1,000 people on your email list. It could be from a strong and engaged email list, but it could also be a platform of excited readers of your previously published books if you're an established author. It could be a highly engaged social media following. It could be a community of friends and family who are ready to support you, who understand your heart and your why behind what you're doing. And they're like, yeah, I'm getting on board. I've got your back. I'm going to help you bring this to life. It could be just communities that you're connected with that you've already consistently brought value to. And if you've done that, they might be ready then to come alongside of you. It's important in all of it to just think outside of the box. It may not even be people that you expect who are ready to jump in and be a part of bringing your Kickstarter to life. So think outside of that box, but it is important to have a crowd that you're bringing to Kickstarter. And then I mentioned this briefly, but you also do want to understand your personal why behind your book and your Kickstarter campaign so that you can articulate it well. I think, especially as a debut author, I think that was one of the things I was able to do with my first campaign. I knew why I was writing these books. I knew what my heart was behind it. I knew the readers I wanted to reach with my stories, and I could articulate that. And I believe that why was what engaged people who maybe weren't even necessarily as interested in my book, specifically some friends and family in that space, in order to give them the reason why should they even kind of be alongside of me and back me in this. And so understanding your why is really vital. Yes, we want to get money from our campaigns and publish our books, but why do you want to write these books? Even if it's, I want people to escape into an excellent story where they can get lost for a few hours and forget the craziness of life, that's a great why. People are going to resonate with that. Just know what your personal why is so that you can articulate it to those who are coming to your campaign. Because again, this is where you're going to prove to them that it's worth backing here instead of going through Amazon. These are the things that are going to draw them in. And this might sound silly, but I have to say it. You also have to be able to write a great book. I know we're not talking about craft today, but it's important to acknowledge that you can't just slap something together and expect it to do well on Kickstarter. It does need to have some substance. It needs to be good. You need to be excited and proud of the book you are promoting to those who are going to read it, because that's how you end up gaining engaged and excited fans for life, because you wrote something excellent and of quality that they loved. And if you don't have that, publishing in any space isn't going to go well, but especially on Kickstarter, you really do need a strong, great book. And it's also helpful to have a genre that has seen past success on Kickstarter. Any fantasy authors here? Brandon Sanderson, you can thank the guy. He brought thousands of readers. I, like, keep bringing him up, but he really did a lot for the Kickstarter book space. So if you have a campaign, a book that has some readership already on Kickstarter, that's helpful in terms of getting additional readers beyond the ones you bring. And then finally, it's important to note that success on Kickstarter is something that you should define for yourself before you launch your campaign, at least to some extent. Even if you have a smaller audience, you can still have a successful Kickstarter, but that may mean you raise $500 and that's it, which is excellent. That's great. You still wrote, like, you still got $500 for your book, but it's not millions of dollars. It's not tens of thousands of dollars like some of the famous Kickstarters we might see raising, but you have still grown your audience to some extent. You can continue that growth. You can do more with your next Kickstarter and so on. So it's important to know what would be successful for me? What is an important threshold for me to meet for this to be successful? How is this, like, where is this in my own heart and mind? Like, what's the success here for me? Because it is different for each author, and I think it's important to think on that for yourself before you do it and before you start comparing yourself to other people's Kickstarters, because that comparison game gets real old real fast and real exhausting. So I don't recommend that one. I do recommend figuring out for yourself what is important for you. And then finally, how do you know if you're ready for a Kickstarter? This is, again, very, very personal. It is a personal thing, but I wanted to touch on it because, as I said earlier, I do hear people say a lot, they're going to jump into Kickstarter and they don't really think about all of the things that they need to have in place in order to do that. They're not really ready for the Kickstarter themselves. So I would encourage you to just a few things that you could maybe think about to know if you're personally ready. First is, where are you at with your current project? Is it finished? Is it just an idea? Does it need editing? If you're running a Kickstarter to fund for editing, that's great. But if you don't have any existing following for your work, it could be harder to raise the adequate funds for a good editor, right? Editing costs us money, but it's always worth it. But it is important to note that if you need that and that's what you're going in for, it can be a little harder if you are a new author. Uh, Two, will your following support special editions? If you'll be kickstarting an old series but with limited edition. So this would be an author who has a platform. Maybe you have a book you published with a traditional publishing house years ago. You've got the rights back. You're now ready to refresh the series, bring it to life again. Well, if you're going to do that, will your following be excited about special editions? If you do special editions, you can raise a lot of money on Kickstarter sometimes and create these gorgeous books. That's something that's beautiful for you as an author, obviously, but also for your readers. But you need to know that they're going to actually want that. They want the limited special editions with the color pages or foiling or, you know, four-edge designs and all of that. But you do usually need a minimum order of at least 300 plus books for something like that, depending on where you get them printed. So you need to know, like, am I going to actually be able to do that? And if you are, then awesome. That's a great thing. Um, and then what do you have to offer in your Kickstarter? The more things, the more money you can earn, essentially. So if you have multiple books in a series that you're offering, that's great. If it's the first book, are there different, can you do a hardback and a paperback and a special edition and an ebook? And just think through, what do you have to offer for this campaign? I will say audiobooks rarely do well if you're just doing a straight audiobook edition of your book. It's some people can make it work, but it is usually a much harder campaign to fund.
Mm.
Um, and then finally, do you know how you'll attack your Kickstarter, and do you have help in that? I had, like I said, my friend Corinne, she and I were in it together. We talked through everything, over the top detail oriented, both of us. So we just went through everything multiple times, read all these books, listened to all these podcasts. But it was great to have her in that with me. And you want help. You want that support. You want someone who's like, no, you've got this. Let's do it. It's going to happen. It's going to come together. You've done all the work to prepare. And you want that help emotionally and personally, but you also want that help from your crowd as well, who's like ready to come in and be excited with you. So you can, a lot of times it is recommended to, this is kind of an aside in, if you to know how to know if you're ready, but there's a lot of recommendations out there to have a low funding goal of like $500, but you have to know, if you're going to do a $500 funding goal for your campaign, you have to be ready to send out your books even if you only fund at $501. So if for some like really beautiful special editions, that's going to put you in the hole because essentially the cost is going to outweigh the amount of money you've earned. So you just have to weigh all of that out. And it's not to be scary, but just to point out that if you're going to move ahead with your Kickstarter project, there are a lot of things that you need to think about and make sure you're prepared for as you go into it. And just for those who maybe are like, "Oh, I like it, but I'm still not sure," here are some reasons that maybe you shouldn't do a Kickstarter. If you have done no research on Kickstarter at all, you've never backed a Kickstarter, you've never looked at the platform, you probably shouldn't do a Kickstarter, at least not yet. You need to get involved, understand the platform, see how it works, back other books, back other projects, see how the platform functions. If you have 0 online presence, unless you have a huge real life following, if you have no email list, no social media, no podcast, nothing you're doing where you have any kind of following, you're probably not quite ready for Kickstarter. You probably actually need to do the platform building right now. That's the stage you're
Yeah.
in. Kickstarter can come later, but you're not quite ready for it yet. And if you have a product that isn't new, Kickstarter only wants new. So you can have a book, like I said, previously published that you're revamping and it's a whole new edition, but it has to be a new edition. You can't take the same cover, same everything, and try to republish it on Kickstarter. They won't let you do that. They always want new projects. And then if you're in it just for yourself and you really only care about what you're gonna get out of it for you, then that's gonna make it really hard to run a Kickstarter because, like I said earlier, people mostly care about how you can benefit them, not how they can just benefit you. So you wanna know, like, there is a community aspect here. You wanna give to your backers. If you're going in with a heart to bless and serve your readers, you're going to have so much more fun with this campaign than if you're just thinking about it all for yourself. So I would say if you're kind of in any of those places, you just either you shouldn't do a Kickstarter or you're just not ready to yet. But it doesn't mean you won't be for some time down the road. So I think that's my kind of basic overview of Kickstarter. If you want to, we could dive into questions, whatever you guys want to do.
Okay, that's great. We do have some people saying that, I think it was Kathy said that her grandchildren maybe loved your books, and someone else said you're such a good writer. So that was really just fun. Yeah, Kathy's teenage grandson. So that's fun. Um, yeah, I was gonna ask if you could, or okay, one reason I want you to talk about Kickstarter was even at the conference, you had mentioned to me that you had read all these books and studied and did all this studying about it first. And I was very impressed by that because so often we just sort of, I don't know, like we read a little bit and then we think we know what we're going to do and then we try and maybe things go well, maybe things fail on different parts of marketing, not just Kickstarter. So I love that devotion to really figuring it out and studying it so in depth, and especially with somebody else too. So that made it like, oh yes, that sounds great. I guess, when I think of like trying to do a Kickstarter and I've not been very involved, I've only done a couple things as far as funding, and I feel like you're right. That's something I would want to do more of before I did my campaign on my own. But it's all the it's kind of like the swag and the price levels is just figuring all of that out because um how much value does someone really put on a bookmark or something like that, and
Yeah,
it's like is that really worth it? And I think I would have a tendency to just not be good business oriented toward this, and you have to be. I mean, that I would want to give more things away than I could afford to give away, I think, to entice people to fund at
sure.
different levels.
Yeah. Well, I think it's easy as authors to think certain things have 0 value, but you kind of do have to think about it from a reader perspective, and if readers love character art, there's certain genres that their readers are all about the swag. I think fantasy
Yeah.
authors their readers do tend to really love that. I'm not quite in the fantasy space, but I do have young adults reading my book. So I have teens and kids who are, early 20s or whatever. They're not
Yeah.
kids, early 20-year-olds, whatever that age group is.
Yeah.
And,
They
they
love
do like
merch.
some of
Yes.
yeah, they do like
Yeah.
some of the pretty things and the swag and the stickers, and they're putting them on their water bottles, and that's part of the fun for them. So you have to think in that sense. I tend to use those as stretch goals. So my
Okay.
bookmark for my both of my campaigns was one of my stretch goals at one point, and it was just like, okay, if we get so I think my first or my second campaign, I had a higher funding goal is because I had a successful first campaign. So I was
Sure.
like, okay, my funding goal was $3,000. We hit that. I think one of my early stretch goals, because I wanted it, I really like maps. That's always one of my stretch goals. I always want to map in my book, so I'm always eager to have that as my like early stretch goal. And so we had that at one point. So it's like, okay, if we hit $5,000, we're gonna get a map commit. I'll get a map commission to be added to the book. And then it was like, okay, if we get, I'm making up numbers now because I don't remember my
Sure.
exact
Sure.
numbers here, but if we hit $6,000, all right, we're gonna get a bookmark. Everyone who backed at a physical level and above, they get the bookmark added to their package. If you got a digital ebook, you can get the bookmark, a digital bookmark, which I don't know if people care about that, but it's like I'm not going to ship out something to someone who didn't already purchase at a
Right.
physical level. So you do think through
Right.
those things, and the stretch goals are essentially just like booster packs for their package at that point. You know, they're going to pay for the book at the level you've determined is workable for you. They're going to pay the
Mhm.
shipping, they're going to do that. But they're also like for my readers, I've been thinking about this because I am building out my next campaign. And it's like, you know, they're getting my physical book and it's a little more money, but they're also getting an ebook version. They're also getting it months before it releases. They're also getting, which is, they're also, for me, I include acknowledgement in my novel, like at the back in the acknowledgement section, I have a Kickstarter backers part. And so it's just,
Like
you know,
that.
all of the backers are listed out. People like to see their name in a
Yes.
book, and we're
Yes.
authors, so sometimes we don't think about that. It's not a big deal. We can add someone's name randomly to our book if we feel like it, you know, or we're feeling very happy with them or very annoyed, you know, their name can be in the book. We never know. But it is something that not everyone gets, and that's special for them. They're willing to pay more money because they want to see that at the back of their book, their name is in the acknowledgments. In my previous campaigns, I've had levels where you can create a character, and that's a lot more money. And I had for my first campaign $1,000 level where someone could create a character. I'd write a short story about that character, and we're gonna, you know, so they had all these things. I didn't think anyone would do it. I just, you know, I
Sure.
Thomas Umstattd Jr. is somebody I've listened to all of his advice.
Yes.
That's why I was at the novel marketing conference.
Yes.
And he says, you know, you just never know who might want to back at that level and who might find that that is valuable enough to them to spend the $1,000. And I had someone back at $1,000,
Wow.
and now that short story became a novel because I can't write short. So, and now have a third book that I published in the past year. So it's great, but you know, so it's just different things. There's different ways you can add value to their packages. And I am not a numbers person. I get my sister and my dad to look over everything for me because otherwise I'm like, that number looks pretty and nice, and I'm just adding it. And that does not work in any kind
Right.
of real world. So I come up with, I don't really do it in that silly of a way, but I do come up with what I think might work. And then I give them what I've worked out and I ask them to kind of go over it and help me see if it's actually workable. So I do recommend, I think, especially as creatives, sometimes math isn't also our strong suit.
Right.
At least for me,
Right.
I hate math. So it's nice to have a math person who can help make sure that business accounting side is actually in a good place for you as you enter into the campaign.
Oh, I love that. Pam's got her hand up. So Pam, do you want to just come on so we have a face, not just a disembodied voice?
Well, I am working on a short story based on the Invisible Man, so I could be disembodied, but
Oh, love it.
Carly, can you give a little more information on the re-releasing? Like Fairy Eater is out of print. Okay. Love to Read, Love to Write put a lot of people's because it had been out for 5.5 years, so it was time.
Sure.
I would like to re-release it at some point. Or Willoughby, who's, his books are out of print because Candy Abbott passed away and the publishing house closed. I would like to somehow do something with that. What were you saying about Kickstarter doesn't want you to re-release, or can you give more information on that?
Sure. It's not that they don't necessarily want you to re-release. They just always want a new project. So for Fairy Eater, for example, I would recommend, you know, go through it, refresh the manuscript. And, you know, so now you're like, okay, it's a fresh manuscript. I would also recommend a new cover.
I
And
already have the cover done,
yeah.
new cover
So
done.
you're
Yeah.
essentially just saying like, look, it looks different. Like this was the one, now it's this, it's new. We're going to say this is a special edition or a new edition or whatever. And
Okay.
it's like on Amazon, you can do this as well, you know, where you're like, oh, I've refreshed the interior, I've got a new cover, I'm putting up a new edition of my book. It's that kind
Yeah.
of idea. And if you do a new edition for example, on Amazon, you now can rank for a #1 new release again. You have these new things, these new badges you can get. And it's the same kind of idea with Kickstarter. You just need to have refreshed it, and so that it is not exactly the same as what someone would buy on Amazon. But if it's not even up there anymore, I do think you have a little more wiggle room. But you would just, if they came back to you and said this book's already been released, I would just say, okay, it's a new edition, it's a limited edition, or it's a special edition, and etc. And just
Right.
give the reasons it's different than it was before.
It
But
could
if
have extra elements in it that the other one
exactly,
didn't
yeah,
have.
yeah,
That's true. And then plus I've started the prequel, but I know that like Tosca Lee, who is, you know, New York Times best-selling, like had a horrible time re-releasing a couple of hers that went out of print because Amazon told her she was plagiarizing.
yeah.
So yeah, okay.
But Kickstarter, a lot of, if you go on Kickstarter, look up this, a lot of authors, especially in the fantasy space, will release limited or not even limited, just new editions, beautiful
Yeah,
special editions of their books. You can look and see how they're managing it and see if there's some ideas you can get from that, and how they structure their campaign, how they deal with it being a book that's been previously released, why
right.
they would want, why a reader who's already purchased an old copy of the book might still want the new copy. You kind of look at the verbiage they use. Their campaigns are current, they're running, or they just finished.
Mhm.
Look at those and see, because Kickstarter allowed that to happen. So they're okay with that kind of campaign. They just want it to feel like it's a fresh new thing, you know. And
Yeah,
so, and think of, for your readers too, why would they want the new edition? Even if you
right.
have a bonus something at the end, a bonus chapter. If you could come
Okay.
up with a bonus, you know, see the scene from this person's point of view, just some extra thing that's like a few pages or even 10 pages, 30 pages, whatever, and add that in. And now it's a new extra bonus that people might actually be
Yeah.
excited about and want. You could think about including character art within the book.
Mhm.
You could look at it, think a little outside the box even.
Right.
Why would a reader maybe want this version as opposed to the old one, even if they have it on their shelf? You loved Fairy Eater. You're going
Yeah.
to love this just as much. You're going to love it more, actually. It's got all these fun additional elements. You want to make sure you grab your copy while it's up on Kickstarter, and then make it available much later on Amazon, a few months later before it goes live there.
So you don't have to, if you're doing Kickstarter, you do not have to publish through Amazon. You could go through Ingram Spark or
Yeah.
someplace else.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I personally will launch my Kickstarter. So my plan right now is I have a Kickstarter coming up on July 12th, right, for my third book, and I will run that, and then my plan, hopefully, depending on getting my edits done, is to have that all finished and ready to go to my Kickstarter backers by September. And then my book won't launch officially till December. So my Kickstarter backers get it a few
Wow.
months early. I have friends who have even more lead time between. They'll have 6 or 8 months between when the book is given to their Kickstarter backers and when it's officially launched on Ingram, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, etc.
And
So
that's
Mhm.
smart
there's
because then you can
Thank you.
generate reviews when it releases.
exactly, yeah.
True.
It does
That's what
have that extra bonus.
I'm going to ask, if it was, is that just to give them that special feeling of getting the book earlier? Is there another reason behind that as well, to have that
It's
lapse?
it's two things. It's you do want to give them that special feeling of like, okay, this is the book that they're getting it early. It's like, I like to say, it's like you're getting to see a movie before it
Mhm,
releases, right? That epic
mhm.
premiere, that that
Yeah,
red carpet moment. Those people all pay the money to show up there because they want to be part of that. That's special.
exactly.
It's before everyone else. And people have FOMO, you know, fear of missing out, and they don't really want to not be there when that cool thing happens. So there's that element. But the other side of it is, you want to give them a reason to not, like, if it's the next week, the next month that it's available on Amazon, it's one more reason for them to not back your Kickstarter. But if they can't get it for several months, then now
Yeah,
it's like, well, I really want to read it. So, well, yeah, I'm just going to get
yeah.
it. You know, it's that kind of an idea.
All right. Kathy's got a question. Kathy, you can just come on and that's fine, and ask your question.
All right. Um,
Yeah, there you go.
there we go. Yeah. Okay. Um, Carly, talk about what you had to do after the Kickstarter was over. What all did that involve for you?
Sure. So post Kickstarter, there is the fulfillment process. So depending on where your book is at, you'll finish that out and then you have it where you're going to send it to get the print copies, you're going to format the ebook, you're going to do all of those things to have the book ready to get to your backers. And that's your fulfillment period. So for me, it was doing my small print run. I get my books from my printer and then we go over or then I sign them, I package them, I do all of that stuff, I ship them out, I send out the ebooks, all of that, and that all is happening, like, in the weeks after the Kickstarter. It usually takes about 2 weeks for, you to get your funds from Kickstarter and for them to show up in your bank account, so I usually wait till I receive them before I send out any of the rewards, but, yeah, it is a lot of work because you are going through and doing it all yourself. However, there's something fun about knowing the name of every single person who's gonna go read your book,
Yeah.
and sending out the ebook to someone who's in Germany, and you're like, "Well, how did you find out about this?" And it's just there's that fun element to it as well. So, yeah, but it is part of the process. Sorry, my phone
That's
buzzing
okay.
over here.
Yeah.
And, yeah, and it is like a part of the Kickstarter process is you do have to like do all of the fulfillment at the end, but it takes time, but it is fun when you think about it in terms of, oh, I don't know who my readers are on Amazon. And I guess as a Amazon buyer, I'm just as happy that all of the retailers don't know who I am. But there's something so fun about knowing the names of each of your readers and your backers and being able to send them a personal thank you and sign that book knowing that they're gonna read it and hopefully love it. So
Oh, that is cool. And you brought up something else then that you had to send something to Germany, so there could be international costs involved that we would have to think
yeah.
about. Yeah.
So I just do
Okay.
digital goods for people who are in
Yeah.
other countries. So
Okay.
I just know they're from Germany because of stuff that they've said to me or whatever.
Okay.
But it's more just the ebook. I know people who also will do international shipping and they mess with all of that as well. I feel like if you're new to Kickstarter or this is your first time doing one, I would recommend keeping it domestic. You can select that when you're putting everything
Okay.
together. You can also adjust. I had someone from Canada who really wanted to buy my book, and so I was like, "Okay, this is how much it's gonna cost if you wanna pay that much money for shipping."
Mm,
They did, it was I thought was an exorbitant amount, but
it
they were willing
is.
to,
Yeah,
so
it is.
so I created the Canadian, like, shipping level for that person to then
Mhm.
go in and do all of that so that I could send it to them. So you can adjust as you go, you can add that in if you have a bunch of people who are in a certain place that really want your book, you can go figure out what that cost is gonna be, I use Pirate Ship for my shipping and everything. It's like I feel like there's a stamps.com or something like that. Like, they're just
Mm,
ways you can print out your packaging stuff at home and put it
okay.
on your packages and then bring it to the post office. You can go to your local post office and ask them. But that is international is a whole nother ball game. So I recommend
Yeah.
not doing that unless there's a real reason that you feel like there's a demand and people who really want that.
On your swag boxes then, where you've got a physical book inside and then whatever other things they got because of
Mhm.
what level they were, did you get special boxes, or did you, figure out the packaging, how you're gonna do that?
Yeah, I just buy stuff. I didn't get printed boxes. Some people do. They get really fancy
Oh,
boxes and stuff. I do like to try to keep my costs in a place where it's
yeah.
manageable. So for me and for my backers, I
Yeah,
especially if I have teenagers who read my books. If they're paying for the book out of their own money, their parents are probably doing it. But if they're paying or if
mhm,
it's something that they're asking for, it's a lot of an easier ask to get a $20 or $30 item than a $50 item, and if the
sure,
reason it's now 50 is because I wanted a pretty box, I'm
right,
not gonna get the pretty box, so I just get, I usually either use bubble mailers or for,
okay,
certain things, and then other ones I'll do, like they're just boxes you can get on Amazon
sure.
essentially, so
Are you able to do mostly media mail then or not, depending on what's inside
it
the
depends on what's inside.
right,
Media mail works most often, but there are
sure,
times where it
it's
needs
just a
to
book.
go to the next. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So that is, I mean, that's just the shipping costs can be really high if you're not prepared for that. So,
Yeah.
and they've gone up. I mean, I used to be able to mail books for less than $3 and now it's more than $4 to
Yeah.
just
It's
a mail
crazy.
book. So, and cost of your envelope, which I always forget to think about, but it's still a
Yeah.
cost. I mean, it is. So
Yeah, and so you just make sure you build that in. You can
have to
charge
build it
shipping
in.
additionally, which is what I typically do. It's just an additional cost that comes, and the backers see it and they know it,
Oh.
and it's fine. So you can do it like that.
All right. Wait, you mentioned earlier before we got on the recording that you could show us kind of the back end. Do you
Oh,
mind
sure.
going ahead and doing that now? We've got about 10, 12, 15 more minutes. So we'll do that. And then if you have any more questions, please put them in the chat, or we'll invite everybody to come on for the last few minutes to see if we can
Yeah.
get this answered. This has been just remarkably helpful and
Oh,
practical. So I'm trying to
great.
think through this myself. So I hope it is for other people too.
All right, let me see here.
Yeah. And
There.
sharing screen can be a little bit tricky sometimes. There.
All right, can you all see this then? Is
Yes,
that all
we
right?
see
Awesome.
the
Let me make it
screen.
bigger here. All right, so this is the back end of a Kickstarter campaign. So this is for my third book, which is coming out. If in the beginning you have your basics section where you're gonna fill out all of your basic information. So this is my title of my third book. This is a little subtitle about it. The categories you're gonna put it in. My amazing cover designer created this graphic for me. I am still needing to make my project video. This is something that it's optional, but I do recommend, and just try to keep it around 2 minutes, under 3 if you can, because that's about what people will actually watch. My
Mhm.
funding goal, my target launch date, my campaign duration, all of those things. And then that's just your basic beginning part. And then the rewards are like this is what people can buy. So I have let me just show you the preview of it. So this is what the campaign will actually look like once it goes live. And then this is the story behind it. This is what the
Nice.
book's about. And then these are the different levels that people can back at. So this just kind of gives you a feel for what it actually looks like. Um, the It's a little different because this is my third book in my series. It's a little weird when you get into multiple books in the series. I found that trying to figure out what to say in it is different because I can't just I have to give warnings. Like, if you haven't read the books yet, go down to this new here section, new to series section, because my blurb for book 3 gives away things that happened in book 1.
Uh,
I don't know how to fix that. It just is part of the process. So, but there's all this, what the book's about. There's different like levels they can back at. I have like an autographed paperback, and then there's also an ebook set and different things like that. So, and then I give a little blurb about Recruit. Um, and I also the more graphics and things you can include, the better. It keeps people moving through the page. If you just have loads of text, it can be overwhelming and people don't really like that as much. So breaking it up with graphics. My book has won multiple awards, so it's just more of a social proof kind of thing here. And then I offer sample chapters. So if they've never read any of my books, and it's like, okay, then check out my first 3 chapters for free of Recruit, of Taliona, see if this is the type of thing you would like. Again, you want to feel confident enough in your books that you can give people a sample and believe that they're going to come back and read the next one, which again, the importance of craft here. In my first 2 campaigns, I gave a lot more about my story behind it. So I give links for those here, rather because I have so much more to talk about in this campaign, because I have so many different types of uh, items they can buy, multiple books in the series. I just link to those campaigns in this one. This is my short story that became a novel, The Abandoned Shores. So it's there for people. And then I do have different levels that move up. So I have deals that have multiple things in them. I do a special numbered edition signed hardback. My hardbacks are case laminate at the regular like hardback level. The special number edition one is a dust jacketed hardback with a gold foil printing. And I only ever print 100 of those for each of the books. So once they're gone forever. And that's just
Mhm.
so, and I do have people who buy them who get that level. So I recommend including things like that if you can. Not everyone wants to do that. They don't want to limit it to 100, but it is something you can do. And then I give like this is Abandoned Shores. I have higher levels for people who want to go higher. And then I have a rewards section that explains my rewards, how they work, why, things to note. Um, and then I like to create, like I said, infographics and visuals that people can then see so that they can, I don't know, hopefully get more excited about it. And then stretch goals, I don't give information about my stretch goals till after my campaign funds, because I did that for my first book. And my campaign funded incredibly well on day one. I think we were in the, I think, $3,000 or $4,000 range by the end of the first day. And I had stretch goals for 2000. And I think we actually hit 5,000 in the first day. And I had stretch goals for 2,000, 3,000, and 4,000. And so we blew past them all immediately. And I realized then that if you don't tell people what your stretch goals are, it allows for a lot more flexibility as the campaign is actually rolling out. So, because you can adjust when those stretch goals will happen. And I'm also going to let my backers this time around vote on, do you want a sticker or bookmark, or like have my stretch goals kind of as a voting option, which is something my friend Corinne did for her campaign and I really loved. So they just kind of, here's my shipping. This is my current shipping prices, which I'm still have to make sure, like you said, USPS prices change quite a lot. So I have to make sure they are still good. And then I give a tentative fulfillment plan. And this is like about the team, talk about my cover designer, my editor, my early readers, costs and business notes. For those who actually care about all of that, I give all those details as well. So that's what it looks like. That's what's going to look like when it goes live. And in the back end of it, you get to edit all of this stuff. This is all things that you would create yourself. You create your reward tiers. You create your story page where you put in your graphics and your text, and all of this is editable during the campaign as well. I'll adjust this once the campaign is running to announce new stretch goals, to announce what's happening within it, what we've hit, what we've done, and try to keep people excited as they come see the page, see that there's activity. This doesn't have to be stagnant. This can be something that is organically moving with your actual Kickstarter as well, which is really neat. And then this is just the other back part of it where you're putting your profile, your collaborators, if you have any, payment section that you have to fill out. And then there's the promotion section. So this is where this is my pre-launch page, which I have live. And just looks like this, and people can go and click notify me on launch. I can't because it's my own campaign, and then I have 107 followers. And when it launches, as soon as this campaign goes live, 100 and whoever's clicked this button by that point, they'll all get an email, and it will tell them this campaign is now live. You can go support grab your product or whatever. And the Kickstarter just automatically pushes out that email. So it's a great way to gain some traction right at the beginning by having this pre-launch page set up and allowing people to be notified on launch. So I've had this up for a couple of months now, and just let people know. And some people will click it and some people will just go back it once you tell them about it. But yeah, so that's kind of just the basic overview behind the scenes of the Kickstarter. Hopefully that's helpful to see.
It is. And you mentioned one thing that you learned was the stretch goals thing. Is there anything else that you learned from your first campaign that now you're doing very differently?
I would say the stretch goals one was probably one of the biggest, just because it was, I like seeing stretch goals personally, like as a backer. I like to know what possibilities there are in the campaign. So that's why I gave them to everyone for the first book. But then it just ended up kind of being like, oh, now I have to figure out all these new stretch goals that I wouldn't have had to figure out if I had just adjusted,
Yeah.
And so that's definitely probably my biggest one. One of, like you mentioned earlier, I read a bunch of books on Kickstarter. I listened to any podcast episode I could get on the topic. I watched webinars. I talked to people who ran Kickstarters. I backed campaigns. I just haunted anyone who was doing a Kickstarter that looked like it was something similar to what I wanted to do, and learned as much as I could. And I think that really helped me when I actually launched, because I had done the research, and I'd rather learn from someone else's mistakes than make them myself if I possibly can. We're all going to make our own mistakes, obviously, but if we can learn from someone else who's gone before us, then I'm always really happy to do that. So that was definitely helpful in keeping the learning curve down. And each campaign I run, it adjusts slightly. My marketing looks a little different for each one. There's different elements that I do and try and experiment with. Others that I'm like, this worked really well, we're going to do it again. Other things that like, I tried, it failed. All right, we're not doing it again. And it's just kind of something you have to work with each time you publish a new book or each time you run a new campaign through the platform.
Well, that must have been so exciting though, that first day to get so much funding
Yes.
so quickly. I mean, that is amazing.
It was crazy. It's so crazy. I can't believe it happened, but it was crazy. Every Kickstarter though, it's like, I don't know how it's going to do. I get nervous each time because it's like, hopefully it goes well. Hopefully people want to show up and back it, but what if they don't? What if it's not the same? And so it is something that there is that trepidation that comes, but it's also so much fun to just see what God can do and how it can go, and just kind of like, all right, you do what you can, you're faithful in the things that are right before you, and then the results are out of our hands, and we just have to be faithful with our portion. And if we are, then it's often fascinating to see all the ways God can work and move. So I do enjoy seeing that, but it is always a little scary to click that launch button.
Yeah. How long do your campaigns last then?
Yeah, my first two I did 30 days. This one I'm doing 2 weeks because there's this dead zone in the middle and I'm tired of it. I don't feel like dealing with it. So we're going to see how that goes. 2 weeks might be too short. But I also find that you get your people who are, they're the ones who click notify me on launch. They're like, as soon as it launches, they want the book. They're ready. They're diving in. They're doing it. And then you've got your procrastinators. And they're just going to wait until you tell them there's 12 hours left. And then they're, oh, I got to get it. And they run and get the book. It's usually one or the other, at least in my experience. There's a handful who back in the middle, but there's these long days of nothing. And those can be really discouraging. And so I decided to just cut my campaign down and see how it goes with a shorter, more condensed approach. I also just didn't have time to have my campaign, the marketing involved in it. There is a lot you have to do in terms of regularly sharing. It's a lot more effort in that way. And I was like, I don't have 30 days this summer that I can do that, but I can do 2 weeks. So it was just kind of like, that's how I'm going to manage it personally. I have friends who do 21-day campaigns. I'm the guinea pig trying the 2-week campaign, but we'll see how it goes. But
right,
yeah.
If everybody wants to come back on, if anyone has a question, this is your time. Oh shoot, I didn't mean to do that. And if we are in jail, let us know so that we can get you back out again. And while they're coming on, is there one like resource that kind of stands out above all the rest that you like? If someone's wanting just to get started or wants more information, see maybe if it works or not, what one book or what one podcast or, one resource?
Sure. The Creative Pen podcast, Joanna Penn did a few interviews with very successful Kickstarter creators, and I recommend just going through her backlist and finding some of those episodes. I know the Novel Marketing podcast, Thomas Umstattd, has done some as well. I trust both of them, and what they put out, their content is continually excellent. So I think that those are two podcasts I definitely recommend in terms of just looking through their backlist and finding some of those episodes. And then another one, it's Monica Leonel and Russell Nolte. They wrote a book together. I'm trying to remember what it's called. That one, I don't agree with every single thing in the book, but it has probably the most current content when it comes to Kickstarter. It's only maybe 2 years old now. I think. Could be wrong about that too, but it's not that old. And they also have a podcast that they don't post on a lot, but they have some resources on there that are helpful. I think I just don't love everything in it, but I do think the bulk of the content there is really solid. And then there's also, I do recommend, if you're considering doing this at all, go on Kickstarter, go to publishing and follow campaigns. You can follow a campaign and just watch it, but I also would recommend just backing it, even for $1, or get an ebook if the book looks interesting to you. That way you get every single update, because there are updates you can do on Kickstarter that's only to backers. So if you're just following the campaign, you're not going to see every single update. But if you've backed even for $1, you're going to see every single update that they put together. So I would just recommend at least do that for several campaigns. And you also, if you ever want to do like launch your own Kickstarter, it helps in some ways like prove that you care about this platform and you've done stuff on there yourself, because people see a number of projects created, but also number of projects backed. So every dollar project you back actually just adds to that number, and it looks good for when you actually launch your campaign. So those are some things I would definitely recommend doing. And but I think that that one book, which I think it's called Kickstarter for Authors, but I can't remember exactly. It's a good one. And then those two podcasts, just look and see what they've done. But if you have a writer's podcast that you really enjoy listening to, Kickstarter has become a bigger and bigger thing. I've found many writers' podcasts now have at least one episode on there where they interview an author who's run a successful Kickstarter to share it with their audience. So if there's one that you're like, this is my podcast that I love listening to, I'm not really interested in trying another one, well, just look in their backlist and see if they've done one themselves.
Okay.
But
Now we've got one.
yes, exactly.
Now we have a Kickstarter episode. Oh, that's great. Have I missed questions? Brandy, Melissa, do you see anything I might have overlooked? And if anyone here has a question, please just say so. Yeah.
I had a quick question. Does Kickstarter make it pretty easy as far as how they segment your backers, so you know who supported at what level and who gets what, you know?
Yes, very, very simple. You can drill down like ebook level, just see your backers at ebook. Like each of those levels can be very clearly seen. Another cool thing is you can directly message each of your backers individually. So I usually will do that. Once someone backs, I'll go in and send a personal thank you to them just individually. The first day can be a little chaotic, so I usually catch up on day 2. Your first day is all, hopefully that's like, it would be great if it continued that way the whole time, but it is usually that first day is your biggest rush of new backers and all of that. So but usually
fun.
try to go in and message people. And I think that helps for retention too, just because people feel like you cared enough to reach out to them. And so they're like, oh, well, I'm not as ready to not back anymore, because you can cancel your pledge. You don't get charged until the campaign fully finishes. So it's another way to, keep your people engaged, let them know you care, let them know you're thankful for them.
Yeah.
Carly, how often do you try and send out your email updates during the campaign to people who have backed you? What's kind of your goal there?
I try to send out like to the people individually who backed me. It's usually just a one-time thank you. And then I try to send out an update whenever there's something worth updating, or if I have a reason to send it out. I like to have, some purpose for why I'm sending the update. And usually there is a reason, like, okay, we just hit this goal, or I'm going to do, even if you can do things called flash goals, which are things you just make up in the middle of the campaign. Well, not make up in the middle. You can plan them ahead of time. I tend to be the one who makes them up in the middle if I feel like it's lagging. I'm like, okay, well, we could do this, and if we get X amount more backers in 24 hours, like my friend Emily Haney ran an excellent campaign, and one of them was like, oh, we have a flash goal. If we hit like 10 more backers in 24 hours, we're going to get this cute little sticker. And like, it was just an added thing she was going to throw in, and it gave people reasons to share the campaign. It gave them reasons to now back the campaign. You just kind of want to engage whenever you have something that's going to keep people engaged themselves.
Yeah.
All right. Any other questions? We did have a question about whether you and Corinne, because you're so organized, are going to do a class.
Yeah. Well, so Corinne and I I don't know if we will. My friend Emily, who's also my cover designer, we have talked about doing a course. We both just overbook ourselves regularly, so we haven't done it yet, but we have definitely thought about it. And Emily Haney is awesome. I would recommend actually looking at her past campaign was fabulous. Let me see. Here's a link. Let me see if I can give you guys a link to it.
That'd be great.
This is her last one she did. And then my friend Corinne's was also really good. I'll give you her link. Both of them did even better than I did, which is awesome to see. Like, it's always exciting to see, like, because they were like, oh, all right, had me explain things to them about how to do it. And then it was like, then they just went and they like knocked it out of the park, which is
that's
so fun to see. So their campaigns were amazing. I recommend just their past, but you can still check them out and see what they did and what worked for them. And the three of us do a lot of things together, and we have different a secret project actually that we're working on together, and hint, so exciting things to come. But we have different things that we brainstorm together all the time, and we steal things from one another and help each other out with different stuff. So it's wonderful to have that kind of community around you. And I
Absolutely.
definitely recommend, if you are an author who's like, I want to do this, and other authors who are interested, do it together. It's so much more
Yeah.
fun. And when the day when you feel like I can't do this anymore, usually there's someone else who's not quite there yet, and they're like, no, we're still going to do it. We got this. And you can cheer each other on, and it just helps so much. We don't have to do this author journey alone. We don't have to do the marketing stuff alone. Like, it's good to have buddies in the process with you.
True. It's true. All right. This has been wonderful. I think we could just probably go on another half hour. So we've got a lot. So Carly, just thank you so very much. This was great. So glad our paths crossed and that you're here today. So next week, Brandy.
Yes, next week we have the pleasure and treat of having an award-winning writer with us, Tessa Ashtar. She is a Christie Award winner with her fiction, but she is also a 2021 ECPA Christian Book Award writer for her Bible study. And she is going to be with us next week to talk about writing Bible studies. So this is something that we've not done before. It'll be new and it'll be really great. She's a wonderful speaker, great person, and excellent writer. So come join us next week for writing Bible studies.
Yeah. And so we do our show live every Tuesday, 11 o'clock Eastern, 10 o'clock Central. Go around the globe, find your time zone so you know when to join us. If you're watching the replay, we invite you to join our Writers Chat Facebook group. Make sure you answer the questions or we will not let you in. Also check out the Writers Chat Facebook page where you can see all of our videos, which now total over 300, which I'm very excited about. CJ, we just thank you again for everybody here,
Yes.
including you, if you can. And if you'd like to, we ask you to stay after I turn off the recording for the after party. Otherwise, we'll see y'all next week. Bye-bye, everybody. And now here comes the fun part where I try to find, because they've changed things and I honestly cannot find it. Everyone smile. I am not kidding. It is like it is gone. Hold on. I'm afraid I'm going to hit the end button and everybody's going to go away.
Yeah, that's often what happens.
Yeah.
Is it in the more section?
There it is.